All right, welcome to Garden Talk. Today we're going to do a session on sensory gardens. Lynette Siverling has been a master gardener for over 10 years with our Genesee County program. And Lynette had this idea a couple years ago that she was interested in. She did a lot of research. She visited some gardens. And so we have her presentation today. Thank you, Lynette, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jan. My presentation is, like Jan said, about sensory gardens. You got the idea one day sitting in my dentist's office waiting my turn, and I turned to get a magazine to read while I was waiting. And the cover of the magazine illustrated a sensory garden. It's one of their articles in the magazine, which got my attention. So I went to read the article, and it was all about a sensory garden, which I had no idea anything about a sensory garden or had ever heard of one. It's about your five senses and how a garden is constructed and designed around your five senses to mental health, well-being for soul, mind, and body. And each design in the garden for the five senses is around those things. The plants are designed to stimulate those senses. And it was extremely interesting, the article. And so I thought I would do a little research on it and present it to Jan for a garden talk. So in my, I decided to go and find some sensory gardens to get pictures from and some ideas for the presentation. But what I found was that the gardens themselves are very hard to find. It's not a common garden, but they are a few here and there. And I found one in Syracuse that was designated as a sensory garden. And I will show you some pictures in the talk as we go along of that garden. Okay, we'll do the sound first, hearing. In your garden, we have chimes or a water feature, musical instruments of something that when the wind blows will trigger a sound. Animals, we have a picture of some chickens that a little girl was fascinated with in her garden.
And even birds. I mean, if you have nature in your garden, they add sound. So the birds singing, yeah. Mm-hmm. So sound is one of our most.
Well, when you think about going out into your own garden, what do you hear? What draws you out there to begin with sound? Or the birds, even the wind blowing, your wind chimes,
even
the rustling
leaves.
of your plants, your grasses have sound. Your ornamental grasses even have sound to them when the wind blows them just right. So there's all kinds of different things to hear in your garden. Even the rustling of your feet in the leaves or in your pathway walking on stones. There's always something to hear that draws you into your garden. Another sense is your touch. Things that make you want to reach out and soft plants you want to feel, and the sense of touching draws you into even more. Some of these pictures of the pussy willows or the lamb's ear, stones.
They're different textures.
The textures, exactly, different textures. I know in my own garden, I'm always reaching to feel the leaves or the petals on my flowers, and they're usually so soft, velvety, but it's another draw card into the garden with touch. Another sense is sight. What do you see? What draws you into that garden space? What you see sometimes is like in this picture, a circle will capture your attention and draw you into it.
And I like this picture we found online. I think it's an actual sensory garden somewhere, but it just makes me think of the yellow brick road.
Oh, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So we have different sites that draw us into the garden. Long views, mysterious gardens that draw you in to want to see more. But beauty, of course, is the first thing that draws you in, that you see, and makes you want to come into the garden. Another sense is your taste. This is a big one. And according to the space that you have or want to maintain, your garden for taste is endless. Vegetables, of course, and herbs, and edible. The taste, that sensory part of the garden, it can be quite large or small according to the size of your space. But there's plenty to put in a garden for that sense, for taste.
Yeah, and I think this was maybe a sensory garden designed for children, so they have a specific bed of plants that children could taste and eat. Of course, if you have children in the garden, you've got to be very careful that they don't just go around and try to taste everything, because a lot of garden plants are actually poisonous or can be toxic. So they designated this area as the taste area if you were trying to do a public sensory garden.
And with the public and with the taste, you've got to be very careful of what you're going to put in that garden because of well, allergies, for instance, with tomatoes. Maybe somebody's got an allergy to citrus or herbs. So you have to be kind of careful as to where this garden is and what you're going to put in it. Who's going to see it?
Right.
Of course, the scent, the smell, that's the biggest draw. Walking by a garden and you can smell the flowers, and of course you're going to turn around and see what that flower is, and it just draws you in. Some of these plants, it was taken in the spring. This was from a true sensory garden in Syracuse. And their smells were dianthus and lavender, excuse me.
And then the lilac.
The lilacs, oh my heavens, you couldn't help it. They were like magnets. You couldn't get away from them because of the smell was so beautiful. It just held you there and it made you want to see more and explore more. The scent is what really gets you into their garden there. And it was a small garden. Again, because it's not a common garden, but they had all the elements of the sensories, and the scent was, at that time when I was there, was the big draw card for them, was the smell. Their gardens were beautiful for this, and endless. The way they had it set up was in a circle, and every little curve in there was something at that time for your sense. It was just fascinating. But those are some of the plants you can put in your garden for smell. Petunias, are the dark purple petunias are the big one.
And scent too, I think, Lynette, for folks maybe who have memory issues, scent can bring back memories, right? I mean, a certain scent can make you relive a memory.
Oh, sure. Lilacs will do that. They're a popular one for scents.
And I'm thinking Lily of the Valley, because to me,
the lilies.
My mom had Lily of the Valley perfume, so that's what I think of whenever I associate.
It just fills a wide area.
Yeah,
too.
so I associate that scent with my mother. So if you're doing something from memory, then you would want to know what scents that the person liked.
Oh, that's a great one, the Lily of the Valley. So.
Yeah. All right, seating.
Oh, yeah. What is a garden if you can't sit and enjoy all your work? And entertain, and other people can come and enjoy what you've done. Seating is a big deal. It's a big issue. And if you can't sit somewhere and enjoy your garden, then I don't know if all the work you've put into it is worth it. You have to be able to sit and look. And of course, the view of what you're going to look at when you're done. I know in my own home, I have a small garden, but a long view, and my seating is at the end of my path, so I can enjoy the entire garden like that, because I don't have curves and then I don't have that space, but I do have seating. So if you have a place to sit and enjoy the garden, and other people can come and sit and enjoy it as well, it makes it all worthwhile. A simple bench, a little chair, a stump, anything that can, you can sit and rest for a few minutes and just enjoy what you've done. Because it is all about the senses and well-being.
Yeah, and I think as we gardeners get older, you need places where you can stop and rest.
Absolutely. And don't forget your coffee.
Yeah.
Pathways, this is a big deal too. The paths, many kinds of paths and different things that you can make your path with. It doesn't have to be a concrete path. It can be a mulch, it can be just pure dirt, it can be any kind of a smooth path that you're not going to trip on, but a path that leads you through the garden to where you are going, where you...
Yeah, so pathways, yeah, I mean, you can use them to make your garden seem bigger or smaller, but when we're talking sensory or in a public garden, such as this picture is, you notice that the pathway is wide enough for 3 people to walk down side by side, or it's sturdy enough or stable enough for wheelchairs or someone with a walker. So again, you have to think about who's going to be using your garden or if it's going to be open to the public. So I think your pathways are determined by those things.
You don't want to be tripping over rocks or potholes or uneven ground. It just makes it more difficult to enjoy the garden itself.
Yeah, especially if you have older folks using your garden. If you're creating a garden for
absolutely.
Or yeah, keeping our disabled people in mind too, that they also need access to the garden.
Another seating area within the flowers in the garden to enjoy the sense, the feel.
I think we found this article. It was a young girl who had created a garden for her grandmother. And I think part of it was she was bringing in familiar objects to help her grandmother with memory loss.
Yeah, that is another aspect and another part of the garden that you can build around for the mental well-being folks that have issues with dementia or just mental problems. And the garden for those kind of folks has to be a subtle garden.
Maybe calming.
The path, the pathway is especially important for those kind of people because with the dementia kind of folks, the path has to be an ongoing forward circular path. They can't stop at the end of a path. If you have a straight path into your garden and you have to come to the end and make a decision where you're going to go right or left, these kind of folks can't do that. They have a hard time making that decision when they get to the end of the pathway and they get frustrated and then you have to leave, and this is not what we want. So your pathway for those kind of folks has to be a circular or a winding path where there's no end and no decision making as they keep going forward. This is what they're all about, is to keep going forward and not having to make a decision because they have difficulty doing that. So with your garden for those kind of people with some mental problems, this would be a good garden for them, where you don't stop and say, oh my goodness, where am I? Or which way do I go now? You want them to be able to keep going forward and on their own, with some assistance, of course, but to enjoy the flowers and the smells and all their senses. You want to they stimulate their senses, but also for their mental problems, you want to be able to keep them stable. And this would be where the pathway comes in. It's very important for them when you're designing that type of garden.
Yeah, and I think this photo is probably at some kind of facility because you can see the round path with the different textures. They actually have a water feature in there. So
All the elements are there.
a lot of the elements are there, even in that small little courtyard garden.
And it's small.
It is small.
Yes, the path, again, like for wheelchairs and walkers or any kind of a walking device, canes and that also have to be considered for these kind of visitors into your garden.
Right.
Some of the gardens are, this particular garden was at that sensory garden, and it was made for disabled people in wheelchairs. Excuse me. Standing, if you have a problem standing too long, there's they had where you can pull your wheelchair up into this space where you can garden. Excuse me again. Also, height is important, where they can stand. They don't have to bend over. They don't have to reach. They don't have to do too much physicalness. But at a height where they can stand and work and enjoy what they're doing is very important as well.
And I think we're seeing a lot more physical adaptations in gardening equipment and raised beds, so that people, even as we age, you can't always bend and get down on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So just raising the level of where you're gardening allows people to garden longer.
Yeah. Just things to keep in mind when you're building your gardens, and who's going to be visiting your garden. That's the most important part. And you want them to enjoy it and stay as long as possible and get the benefits out of your garden. And that's what you're building it for, are those five senses, for your mental health and well-being, and to make you feel good. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and of course, being Cornell, we had to put our research-based knowledge in. So we did find an article that there is evidence now, and I think we've seen quite a bit more of this over the past year or so, that gardening does provide human health benefits and mental well-being. And I know I have many people tell me that's how they get through the day sometimes, is go out and pull weeds.
But it was a fun presentation to put together. In one of the gardens I visited, it even had for blind folks that can't see. It was
yeah, the signs were in Braille.
Braille. Yeah.
So Mendon Ponds Park, if you're not familiar with the area, is actually in Monroe County, outside of Rochester, down in Henrietta. So Lynette discovered, she was trying to find sensory gardens in Western New York. And this was touted as a sensory garden.
The touch, the smell, the feel was for people with vision problems, so that they could read, they could feel the Braille, they could read the sign as to what was in the garden. The smell was, the plants, the plant material was exclusively for their senses of smell and touch. And we captured some of those pictures along the way.
All right, so let's go through some of the photos.
Okay.
And I know Lynette said that it looked like this garden had a carekeeper at some point in time, but probably not recently. It was a little...
These were leftover things that were still there in the garden. It was a beautiful space. But for some reason, unbeknownst to me, it was left unattended for a long period of time. But there were elements still there for the senses. Some, yeah.
All right, so that looks like maybe the remains of what maybe at one point in time could have been an herb garden.
Yeah, there was an herb garden. There was a smell.
Oh, and you talked about the great path. Look at that nice.
Oh, they had a gorgeous deck that you could walk up onto the deck. The other side of the deck was a seating area, and it overlooked the entire garden as to what it did. But as you can see, the plant material around it was overgrown, weeds, and I'm not sure what all was in there, but at one time it was a spectacular garden. There's some more of the seating area and the bench part of the deck. a seating area. And you could walk up into the seating area for handicap. And it was, the railings were still kind of there, not in the greatest shape, but for folks with vision problems could feel their way up into this area and sit and smell. It was truly a beautiful place. And I wish I could have found it in its glory, in its heyday.
So the Kenan Center is in Lockport, New York, and Lynette was told that it was a sensory garden, but when she got there, it's a nice garden, but probably not specifically.
I don't think it was a true sensory garden, but it does have elements of a sensory garden, though it was a very formal garden. Gorgeous, of course. It had the pathways, elements so that for sight, for sound, for smell, for touch. These were all high planters where when you walk past them, you were able to brush against the plants, feel them, smell them, see them up close. But I don't know if it was exactly a sensory garden, because we have a little sign here as well that says it's a formal garden. It had different areas to visit as well. This path was designed for, I'm guessing, a shade.
Yeah, I think that was the shade garden.
Shade. The hostas were gorgeous. And the path, again, was beautiful. A nice long view. There was seating in the water features, gorgeous for sound. The water, you could sit and enjoy. There was a memory garden, many different elements in this garden, but I'm not sure exactly what it was supposed to be. There was a shade garden with some plant material growing up in the trees, and St. Fiacre here to overlook everything. Yeah, I love that guy. And so it had that element as well, and seating. The smell of the lavender was enough to just, wow.
Yeah, they have a formal herb garden.
Yes,
is a
they
big
did.
part of this Kenan Center garden.
I'm not sure if this herb garden was a work in progress, but it looked to me like it had been there for quite a while. Everything was labeled and well taken care of, and plenty of it. And just to walk past it and brush up against these mints and the herbs, the basils, that it was just fascinating. It truly makes you feel good to be there, and you don't want to leave.
All right, so that's kind of a wide shot of
This was kind of on our exit from the garden. This round.
That's part of the herb garden.
That was it. Yeah. But you could walk around it, and never ending. You could exit if you want, or you can come back this way and keep going. There was a children's garden as well there, designed for. There was a like a pre-K.
There's
oh.
Daycare center or something there, and they do have artwork in the garden.
That's the kids did their artwork, and they had it displayed so nice for the kids. It truly was a children's garden there.
So you did finally find the ARC of Onondaga County Garden, and I think that was probably the best sensory garden you found in Western New York.
It is, and actually it's the only one that I found in all my travels that is a true sensory garden. We even have a sign that says it is the foundation, excuse me, of a sensory garden, and it had all the 5 senses there. Walking into it, you had sound, there was little water features, there were plants for seating, smell, touch, hearing, taste, everything was there. The plants, it was in the spring, so the smell of like the dianthus and the viburnums were out, the lilacs were starting to come out, some of the herbs were starting to come about. It was all there. Very small garden, but everything, all the elements were there.
Now you can see the pathways in there. They use color in their paths. They have
Mhm.
benches for seating.
Yeah, this building that you see in the background was the ARC building. And when you come up the driveway, it was a private path into this garden area. It was open to the public, and they said that there were some tours, but it was just getting underway at that time. And what they had done was amazing. Again, at that time of the year in the spring, it was mostly about the smell and the textures, the grasses. It was beautiful. And I even got to meet the master gardener volunteer who took care of the gardens. He happened to be there. He was quite a jolly fellow. He was great. He talked a lot and he was very proud of his work, and he was installing more plants. As you can see, this was what he was working on. These stairs were going up into like another little platform area. Again, very small, but it was there. And he was installing the what was he putting in that? Besides stones, he was working on the path up into this little walk-up area.
Now, I don't know how many people would be able to go up that path, but it
Not
does
too
give you
many.
some interest. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And you did comment about the dianthus because of
Mhm.
the
Oh,
scent.
if you could have smelled that, I think it was Bath's Pink or Fire Witch. I don't know which. Could have been both, but it was unbelievable. He had so much of it, and it was so beautiful. He has the lamb's ear coming up the stairs as you brush up against that and feel it. It was just set up so well. Beautiful. Oh, the trees, the trees were blooming, and the viburnum in the background was exceptionally gorgeous for sight. To walk up to it and touch it, it was just a beautiful, beautiful place. And again, there was a setup for the handicap or the elderly or whoever couldn't bend over and work in their garden. It's definitely a display to give ideas to the public as to what they can do for the more handicapped folk.
Or if you just can't kneel in your garden anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and still want to, because again, it's all about well-being and it's good for your mind and soul to get out there and get your hands dirty.
There he
There's
is.
our friend. He was quite a character, but he was a big help because he told me what he was doing and kind of guided me around a little bit as to what he was planting. And like I said, it was in the spring, so he had much work to do and was installing more plants. It was a work in progress.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting for you to go back and see it again to see.
I would love to go back and see how it's progressed over the last 2 years. I'll bet it's simply amazing. And I would love to see if they've expanded it any, because it sure had my attention.
Yeah.
I would love to see what he has going on in the fall.
Right. So we don't have an audience today, so no questions, but I think our last photo is also from a sensory garden that we found online. I think it was somewhere in downstate New York, but you can see just some of the elements there just from one photo. So,
and if you ever have some time to just do some research on these type of gardens, I'm sure other states have them according to their zone is what they put in their gardens, but there must be more around, not just in New York. It would be interesting to see what other states and other zones put in their sensory gardens.
Yeah, I think when we were doing the research for yours, we found a lot in like California because year-round gardens, but I think it was a very interesting topic.
Can you imagine a southern garden, what those tropicals must be like? They've got to be amazing, and I'm sure they must have those kind of gardens for sensory.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Lynette. Thank you for doing your program today for us on sensory gardens. I'm sure people will enjoy getting a different topic of idea when it comes to gardening or looking at your garden a little differently as to I think most of our gardens have all of the senses covered, but I definitely like that seating area thing. I definitely put more benches in now. that I want to sit in my garden.
I think we do have those elements in our gardens, Jan, and we just don't know it.
Yes.
Because when we plant our gardens, it's like we bring stuff home and where am I going to put it? You just got to have it. And so your garden isn't really planned for it, but I bet all those elements are there. And what a delight to show the public what you can do with those type of gardens. And it was so much fun to visit these gardens. I hope it brings joy to everyone who watches this video and gives them some ideas and gives them some sense of pleasure.
Yes. Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you for having me.